We back again, y'all. We back again, y'all.
Judgment comes for you. When judgment comes for you, what you gonna do when it ain't nowhere to hide? When judgment comes for you, 'cause it's gonna come for you.
That's what I'm talking about. That's why he's in this thing. That's why he's so go. To this day. To this day.
Come on, man. R.I.P. to the GOAT. Toys R Us, man. Oh, man. Come on, man. They took away the GOAT, man.
To this day. To this day. To this day.
They took away the GOAT, man. The memories, man. Whether it was your birthday, Christmas, you know what I'm saying? Just one, tax season hit, and your mama take you to Toys R Us. Y'all just don't understand, man. There'll never be another time. There'll never be another time like that, man. Toys R Us, man. Take me back, man. The good old days, man. Toys R Us, man. I had a funny story. I had a friend who he ended up getting arrested, right? This is like back in, I want to say 2008. Yeah, I want to say 2008. My friend went into a Toys R Us. I don't know how the fuck he did this, but somehow, some way, he locked himself in the video game cabinet at the bottom. He hid behind the boxes, stayed in there the whole fucking time. He stayed in the Toys R Us the whole fucking time till they closed. Went out to Toys R Us, stole hella games and hella shit. He grabbed him a cart. Bro, it was on the news, bro. It was on the news, bro. I knew it was my friend, bro. Because he was crazy, bro. He would do shit like this. I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to put him out there like that. But I had a friend, bro. Y'all can look this up, bro. He was hiding inside the Toys R Us. Waited till they closed. Around 10 o'clock. This nigga is walking out. This nigga got a cart full of nothing but PlayStation 3s, Xbox 360s, all the games you could want. This nigga was walking out. This nigga somehow, some way knew how to turn on the switches, walked straight the fuck out and ran off. I think they said he ran off with over $20,000 worth of merchandise. My God. Hey, I ain't condoning it. But shout out to my nigga, though. Shout out to my nigga, man. Only his crazy ass could do that. That nigga got locked up for 2 years, bro. He didn't get locked up. They sent him to juvie for 2 years, bro. They couldn't keep a real nigga down, though, man. They sent that nigga to juvie for 2 years, bro. I ain't see that nigga again till my senior year of high school. That's crazy, bro. 2008, bro. We was like in the 7th grade, bro. This nigga was crazy, bro. This nigga really did that shit. I'm not making this shit up, bro. Y'all can look this up.
The big news story of the week in the business world is that Toys R Us has filed for bankruptcy. I've been getting quite a few requests to make a video about it, and I completely agree. This is a terrific subject to talk about. So I dropped everything I was doing and dove right into it. Keep in mind that this video is being made the same week as the announcement, and it's sometimes hard to see the full picture from such a close distance, so don't be too harsh if you're watching this sometime in the future and I say something that sounds a little foolish. So what's going on with Toys R Us? If you're like me, you had no idea they were in any kind of trouble and were shocked by the news.
Damn, I just realized Babies R Us is going too. The only place y'all could go to go get them baby clothes before that baby born. Ah, damn. But we got places like City Trends that sell clothes for like $1 and shit like that. So, yeah. They way more cheaper than Babies R Us, but still though, that Babies R Us come in handy when you have a kid. I don't even know why I'm talking about this shit. Like I'm gonna have kids anytime soon. Fuck out of here.
And I'm guessing your next thought was a quick judgment that it must be a result of the internet taking sales away from the store locations. I would even bet you clicked on this video anticipating to hear that. And I don't necessarily disagree with that conclusion, but I guarantee that what's happening with Toys R Us right now runs much deeper than losing sales to Amazon.
Facts.
In 1948, a man named Charles Lazarus opened a baby furniture store called Children's Bargain Town. The company started selling toys, and the demand for them grew. Mr. Lazarus, being an astute businessman, noticed that furniture is pretty sturdy and long-lasting, but toys tend to be the exact opposite. The focus of the business soon became toys, and in 1957, Toys R Us was born. Anyone know where the name Toys R Us comes from? Well, obviously it conveys that they're in the toy business, but any idea as to why those three words are combined in such a strange way? And why it uses the letter R? Well, let me repeat the founder's name. Charles Lazarus. Did I just blow your mind? Another fun fact. Any guesses as to why the R is backwards? Well, Charles Lazarus was a big fan of the band Korn. Okay, one of those two facts was true and the other was a lame joke. You decide which is which. A few years later, Jeffrey the Giraffe was created as the company's mascot.
Jeffrey,
he was
man.
originally named Dr. G. Raff, so I'm sure you can understand why they renamed him. In 1978, Toys R Us went public, meaning anyone could become a partial owner through the purchase of some stock. 5 years later, they made a logical expansion with the creation of Kids R Us, a clothing store for kids. I actually don't care.
Bruh, I just remember they did have that shit, bro. That shit was in the malls, bruh. I remember that. Damn. I just remembered that. Damn, there was a Kids R Us. And that was mainly for like clothes, bro. But they used to sell them in the malls, though. They used to have them in the malls. They didn't have them in the Toys R Us. Unless the Toys R Us was like in a big ass lot by itself. 9 times out of 10, the Toys R Us wasn't in a big ass lot by itself. It was mainly, it was next to a fucking grocery store. It was next to another clothing store. Like, bro, like, nah. Toys R Us was always in a convenient spot, bro, where groceries was. So wherever the grocery stores were, like a Walmart or Kroger or something like that was, Target or Tarjay, whatever the fuck y'all call it, a Toys R Us was nearby. The greatest Toys R Us location, I had to say, was the one that was across the street from Chuck E. Cheese. Them motherfuckers was making bank, bruh. Them motherfuckers was making bank, bruh. And then all the way down the street was a goddamn Babies R Us. Them motherfuckers was some geniuses. I ain't gonna hold you, bruh. For real. Them motherfuckers knew how to market. You going to Chuck E. Cheese. It's your birthday. You got Chuck E. Cheese. Then you go to Toys R Us and get your toy. Then they got a Babies R Us down the street. Oh man. Them motherfuckers knew how to. Them motherfuckers was smart, bro.
Care for this name as much because the name Toys R Us identifies what they sell, whereas Kids R Us identifies their target customer. But kids are also the target customer for Toys R Us. My vote would have been to name it Clothes R Us, since people recognize the R Us part as targeting kids. The clothes part lets you know what they sell, and it follows the same naming format established by Toys R Us.
But wouldn't they have to sell adult clothes as well?
But I suppose most company names don't describe what they sell anyways, so
Facts.
I'm sure there were other factors responsible for its demise in 2003. But I can't get into them right now. This video is about Toys R Us, not Kids R Us. I've already spent too much time on Kids R Us. 1996 marked the beginning of Babies R Us, which, despite having the same naming issues as Kids R Us, still stands today. In 2005, the company was taken off the stock market and transformed into a private company when it was purchased in a leveraged buyout. And in September of 2017, Toys R Us filed for bankruptcy. This is a company that began 60 years ago with roots going even further back. A company that became the standard for toys. Anytime within the last 30 years, including today, if Family Feud were to survey 100 people and ask them to name a toy store, the #1 answer on the board would be Toys R Us.
Facts.
And as of this week, this company has filed for bankruptcy. So, how on earth did this happen? The short answer is that they have too much debt. But that's a no-brainer. Of course they have too much debt. Why else would they file for bankruptcy?
Duh.
So then in my mind, the real question becomes, how did they get so much debt? So let's try to figure out this one together. Dora the Explorer style. Here's a graph that shows their long-term debt over the past 14 years. So which year do you think we should further investigate to try to find out where all this debt came from? Well, it certainly appears that something happened between 2005 and 2006. And I actually already told you what it was. In 2005, the company went private through a leveraged buyout. A leveraged buyout is when you buy a company using a bunch of debt. I can best explain it through an example. Say I wanted to buy Toys R Us. The selling price is $10 million, but I only have $1 million. So I go to the bank and try to get a loan for the remaining $9 million. But it turns out I need a pretty good collateral in order to take out a $9 million loan. So I think a minute about what I have that's of any value. My car probably won't cover it. Oh, I know. How about Toys R Us? If I get the loan, I'll own Toys R Us, and that can be my collateral. So I get the loan, and now I have two things. I own Toys R Us, but I also have $9 million in debt. But really, Toys R Us has $9 million in debt. This is an incredibly simplified version of what happened in 2005, but it didn't cost $10 million. It cost $6.6 billion,
Shit.
most of which was paid for through loans that went right on the balance sheet of Toys R Us. So that explains the huge debt increase. Now, at this point, I'm sure you're saying, well, that sounds risky. And you're completely right. Think of it as taking out a mortgage to buy a house. Once you do that, you better have a reliable source of income, because as soon as the cash flow stops, you're liable to lose your home. Same with Toys R Us. As long as the cash flow situation is fine, there's no worries. But once it slows down, well, here we are. This is from the website Investopedia. Leveraged buyouts have had a notorious history, especially in the 1980s, when several prominent buyouts led to the eventual bankruptcy of the acquired companies. This was mainly due to the fact that the leverage ratio was nearly 100% and the interest payments were so large that the company's operating cash flows were unable to meet the obligation. I think this reinforces what I just said. And just in case you need more proof, here it is from Toys R Us themselves in their annual report from a few years back. Our substantial indebtedness could have important consequences, including making it more difficult for us to make payments on the debt as our business may not be able to generate sufficient cash flows from operating activities to meet our debt service obligations. Here's my point. When that leveraged buyout occurred 12 years ago, it was well known that one of the big risks of doing it was potential bankruptcy. I know as outsiders this crept up on all of us, but for anyone on the inside or anyone following their financial condition over the years, this was no surprise. To continue with my analogy, Toys R Us has taken a pay cut and are now having trouble making their mortgage payments. But now we have a second question on the table. Why aren't they able to make their payments? If everything went according to plan, there would be no trouble right now. So why aren't they generating enough money? This is where our minds always jump straight to blaming the internet. And I can't disagree with that. It's happening everywhere. But in defense of Toys R Us, they do seemingly have a healthy internet presence. On their website, they talk about how they launched ToysRUs.com almost 20 years ago and how it became one of the fastest growing sites in the toy and baby product shopping categories.
Facts.
And that ToysRUs.com is one of the most visited sites in their category. And I see no evidence against these claims. Also, in 2007, they acquired eToys.com and Toys.com, which further strengthened their online presence. I know Amazon is darn near impossible to compete with, but as far as I can tell, Toys R Us hasn't exactly been ignoring their online component of their business. Another thing to point to are stores like Walmart and Target that offer similar, if not the same toy products at lower prices. Not to mention the convenience of picking them up during your routine shopping trips. Maybe it's just because I'm older now, but Toys R Us doesn't seem to have the same weight it once had. Meaning, before it felt like the place to go for toys, and now I see it as the expensive place to go for toys.
Right.
Something that I'm inclined to blame for all of this is the decline of toy popularity in general. Just think about it. Kids aren't spending the better part of their day playing with toy trucks and yo-yos. It's all about technology.
Yep. It's all about the video games, the tablets, getting a computer just so they can play Roblox and shit. Kids ain't playing games these days. Come on now.
Video games are awesome today. It's no longer Pong and Dig Dug, it's Breath of the Wild and GTA 5. Games that could be played for weeks or months before getting tired of them. I defy you to play Pong for any longer than a few minutes. And of course the apps and games on the phone. Why spend a ton of money on Legos
they got a boat game app?
Apps are
Come on,
free?
man.
The bottom line is that Toys R Us isn't doing great, but they're also not doing terrible. Sure, they have their troubles selling toys, and trust me, the troubles were there long before the leveraged buyout. But it was the debt that resulted from the buyout that amplified everything. Back to the analogy. You took a pay cut. Yes, that's bad news. But the fact that you have the mortgage payments to keep up with is what makes it devastating. As for the future of Toys R Us, it's hard to predict anything with much accuracy when they're in the middle of a bankruptcy. But my guess is that they'll stick around. It is the type of bankruptcy where you restructure your debts and stay in business. And as far as I can tell, if this debt is managed a little, maybe they could have some freedom to improve upon their faults and become
Update, that shit did not go into fruition. The motherfuckers are gone. RIP to the GOAT. We'll play it at the end though.
more competitive. Maybe work on ways to lower prices, create a more fun environment for kids, whatever it takes.
They already had a fun environment for kids, man. When a little Star Wars movie came out, and what was it, like 2003, 2004? I want to say Star Wars movie came out. Man, they had the motherfucking lightsabers. You could play with the lightsabers and shit. You could put the mask on and shit. Like, dog, they always had a good experience for kids. It's just, you know, I think it just had to do more with the fact that the shit got too expensive and kids not really wanting to play with toys no more. Like toys are kind of like out the. I mean, toys at this point, you mainly buy toys for like babies. You know what I'm saying? You buy toys for babies. Then when they're about 3 years old and they can walk and talk and shit like that, more than likely they're going to want the tablets so they can watch Coco Melon and Baby Shark. Like, as far as this shit go though, the toys, they kind of get played out, bro, real early. Unless you got a daughter or something like that, then more than likely she'll be in the like Barbie dolls or something like that for the most part. That's your best bet, really.
Let me know in the comments what you think about all this. I identified a few reasons as why they're struggling with their sales, but I'm sure there's many more. If you have any theories, I'd like to hear them. And just an aside, there were so many interesting things about Toys R Us as far as their history and their evolution that I elected to exclude from this video. So if you think I neglected to mention something, I'm sure you're right. Maybe when Toys R Us either makes a recovery or fails altogether, I'll make a new video about it and have a place to include it all. But for now, go to that comment section and let me know your thoughts about everything that's going on. I'd like.
They got this right here. So this is the follow-up. I guess we can do the follow-up. Get a 2-in-1. We'll do the follow-up.
Toys R Us. It's become a sad subject. I never wanted to see the day where Toys R Us is a sad subject. I'm sure you've heard by now, and if you haven't, I'm sorry I'm the one who had to break it to you, but Toys R Us is done. In the US anyway. In Canada, a company called Fairfax bought them, so there's still going to be 80 of them spread across the country, but with the exception of that, it's over. As of this moment, they're in the process of closing 735 US locations, and they're nearing the end of the process. Here's what happens when I call them. Here.
Thank you for calling Toys R Us. We would like to thank you for shopping with us for over 70 years, and we appreciate your kind expressions as we close our doors. As of March 23rd, Toys R Us will start liquidation. Here are a few frequently asked questions for your reference.
And then they just talk about how they're not accepting gift cards and things like that. Here's what I get when I try to visit their website. They say they've shut it down for any purchases and tell us where I can go to keep up with everything. I do recommend that second link for the Q&A if you have any specific questions about doing business with them, but most of their answers either say something has already ended or will be ending very soon. They end their message by thanking us for our business and support over the years. There's no official date set to mark their final day of operations, but it's looking like the majority of Toys R Us stores won't make it into July. Some of the stores have a countdown on display, many of which are counting down to the dates right around June 30th. Some locations have announced that as their final date. Some are simply labeling this time period as their final weeks. Some are gone already. My point is, if you want to make one last visit to a Toys R Us store, you better do it this week. But if you want it to be a happy visit, like you remember, it's probably already too late for that. These stores are empty and depressing. Half the store is just empty shelves. I found this picture to be especially depressing. It's one of those special fixtures that are used to display bicycles. I've just never seen one empty like that.
Damn.
And they're selling everything, all the fixtures and shelves, even the carts or buggies or whatever you call them. You could walk into your local Toys R Us and buy one of them. There is nothing in the store that's not for sale. If you're watching this video just a few weeks after its release, it's already too late. I have a unique perspective here. I have no professional affiliation with Toys R Us, but I did make a video about them. I released it on September 20th, 2017, coincidentally exactly 9 months before the release date of this video, and it actually became somewhat popular, which means for the last 9 months, I've been reading comments about them, almost 8,000 in total. Many came initially, but I've been getting a handful of them every day. I've been reading about people's positive experiences with them, their sadness about them leaving, and so many opinions about where they went wrong. So now I feel this weird connection with Toys R Us. Honestly, it's a bit of a bummer. It's been nothing but bad news, and discussing this topic for 9 months is depressing. But with all the new developments over that time, I felt I left the story unfinished. We needed some closure. My initial video was made the week they announced their Chapter 11 bankruptcy. At that time, they couldn't afford to pay their debts, and the bankruptcy was basically their recovery plan. Restructure their debts, close some poor-performing stores, and make a comeback. It didn't work. The remainder of this video is going to talk about why that plan didn't work. So here's what you have to do. If you want to hear about how they obtained all that debt and why they were forced into bankruptcy 9 months ago, that's all in my first video. It talks about their core issues, and I stand by every part of it, except for when I said this. As for the future of Toys R Us, it's hard to predict anything with much accuracy when they're in the middle of a bankruptcy, but my guess is that they'll stick around. That part didn't age well, but that's why I'm here now, to finish off the story with the final chapter. September wasn't the ideal time for them to file for bankruptcy. See, the busiest time of year for most retailers, and especially for toy stores, is the holiday season. Late November, most of December. Traditionally, Toys R Us would see a huge spike in sales right around that time. About 40% of all their sales were holiday sales. That's probably not a shock to anyone. We can all understand why. So filing for bankruptcy only 2 months before all of that just doesn't seem like the brightest idea. The troubles with Toys R Us started long before September of 2017, but this is when the general public became aware of it. I even remarked about that in my first video. When the public thinks that there's a good chance that you're about to go out of business, it's hard to sell things to them. Has anyone ever received a gift card for Christmas? Well, you probably don't want one from a shaky company like Toys R Us.
Yeah.
You would like to be sure that they're going to be there to honor it. Maybe in the past, you've returned a Christmas gift. That's certainly not unheard of. So again, you want the people who sold it to be there in case a return is necessary. Things like this made people shy away from Toys R Us. Not to mention the ever-increasing competition from the other retailers, particularly Amazon. It all came together to result in terrible holiday sales, which is really bad for them. Picture this. They owed all these people a bunch of money. Their sales haven't been the best. It was their big chance to prove themselves. To prove that they could eventually pay these debts and just pull out of this hole that they're in. There was a lot riding on it. They basically needed a home run, and they struck out. Now, ever since I said September wasn't the ideal time to file for bankruptcy, I'm sure you've been thinking, then why would they choose September to file for bankruptcy? They put this upon themselves. Well, that's really not fair to them, because there's more to it. For Toys R Us to sell us our toys, they of course have to buy the toys from the people who make the toys. And even though the general public may not have known about all their troubles, the toy makers certainly did, which put them into a difficult position. They didn't know if Toys R Us was going to be around enough to pay for the toys that they were selling them. A lot of the vendors were understandably apprehensive about doing business with them. A big reason Toys R Us filed for bankruptcy when they did was to ease the minds of these vendors. And even though it didn't work out in the end, I'd say it was the right call. Sure, their holiday sales were bad, but if the vendors hadn't provided the toys for them to sell, it would have been worse. And I realize I said another sentence that you're questioning. I said Toys R Us filed for bankruptcy when they did to ease the mind of the vendors. Why would that be the case? We just keep unraveling this here. The short answer is that Toys R Us was able to secure a loan through the bankruptcy. Because of the filing, they obtained $3.1 billion so they can continue operations and do things like, well, paying the vendors. Since they now had all this money to work with, the vendors now had more confidence. I hope I described all that clear enough. In case not, here's a quick summary. Toys R Us was pushed into bankruptcy at a terrible time. It greatly impacted their holiday sales and made everyone lose faith in the company. I said it's been nothing but bad news, and that's hard to dispute. Go try to find some shred of good news concerning Toys R Us over the past 9 months. In late January, the news came out that they would close up to 182 stores. About a month later, in late February, the news was that they would probably be closing an additional 200 stores. That would mean just about cutting their locations in half. things just kept getting worse and worse. It all led to their recent decision in March of 2018 to end it all and start liquidating. Before, the plan was restructuring debts and coming up with new ways to keep the company going. In March, the plan turned into selling absolutely everything, paying off whatever they can, and closing all their stores. Yet, the new plan isn't quite as optimistic. The last few months have been filled with all these closings and liquidations, and that's where we stand today. I think we can confidently say that this is the end of Toys R Us, except for you lucky Canadians. Really quick, I just want to repeat this point to make it clear. Everything I just talked about is insignificant when it comes to the demise of Toys R Us. This was all just the final blow. Toys R Us was already losing the match, and that last holiday season was just the final haymaker to knock them to the ground. This actually marks the 70th year of the company. It started back in 1948, and I'd say that's impressive. When we start analyzing the last few months, it looks like a big failure, but when we look at the big picture, it's something to be respected. They've made an impact in many of our lives, and from what I've learned by reading everyone's comments, the impact is almost always positive. Not many people have bad things to say about Toys R Us. I know I said I'm a little drained from talking about this topic for the past 9 months, but it's looking like it's now or never. So let me know in the comments any thoughts you have about Toys R Us. Have you paid them a visit recently when they're going through all of this? Or if not, when was the last time you went there? Here's something interesting. Were you able to find any good discounts? Right now, everything's about 50 to 70% off, but most of the good stuff is already gone. A couple months ago, they were liquidating all the good stuff, but the discounts weren't as attractive. It's always hard to find that right balance. So if you found that right balance, let me know about it. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.
Alrighty, that's just gonna about do it for this one. I'll see y'all in the next video, man. RIP to the GOAT, man, for real.
Boom, 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 boom.
To this day. To this day.